Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back. This is Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold. He is a school psychologist, has been for many, many years out in California, has helped thousands and thousands of students over decades. So much, in fact, that he's still connected to many of them today and helps them, years later. We're going to field your questions, and even some of those come from people looking at what he does and has done as a career goal. So great to have him back here. Dr. Allan Gold is here. How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
Very well, very well. You resonate because it's been a few weeks since we've gotten together, and you can always reach us instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. Got a bunch of different emails from parents, from students. I'm feeling we dig right into that. You ready to go?
Sure.
So this one is from Tasha in Raleigh. Says, my child has ADHD and sometimes I feel like the communication between home and school gets mixed up or lost. What's the best way for parents to collaborate with a school psychologist and teachers so that we all support our kids in the same direction?
Excellent question. And that, of course, depends on the staff in your child's school. But if you can find either the principal or the administrator or the school psychologist, obviously the school psychologist would be the one to try to make the most in-depth contact with. But sometimes you can't always predict who you're going to relate to. Whoever did the diagnosis of the ADHD, if it's the school psychologist, then clearly you would want to work with that person to be a team. If the diagnosis were done by an outside doctor, then that doctor should contact the school psychologist. If the child's on medication, then the school nurse would need to be informed so that make sure that if there's any medication that needs to be taken during the school hours, that's taken care of. So it's very important to have that communication going and constant, actually, particularly if there are interventions that are going on in school, which may be a contract where the child is rewarded for controlling his or her behavior. If it's about medication, if it's about if the child is significantly enough impaired, he or she should have a Section 504 plan, which is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act that was developed in 1975, I believe. And so anybody with a mental or physical condition that requires accommodations, the parents should make sure that that is taken care of. Accommodations might include having an opportunity to move around. Where other kids might be stuck sitting down. If it might be splitting up test taking from one long session to more than one session or several sessions. There many accommodations can be made for ADHD kids, but those are need to be negotiated with the school, things that are practical and that can be done. Maybe special seating for the child. If this is a child who is going to talk to his or her seatmates all the time, perhaps he or she needs to be seated in a special seating. If he or she is easily distracted, not have him or her sit next to a window or a door. There's all of these, there's physical accommodations, there's timing accommodations, there's testing accommodations. But to get to your question, there sh a student study team should have been done already, but it's perfectly okay for the parents to request a student study team, which involves um, staff. It would be the student's teacher, the school psychologist, the principal, and if the child is getting any academic support, that academic support teacher as well. And the purpose of a student study team is to share the information about the kid, brainstorm interventions, and have everybody agree on who's going to do what. And in that way, the parents don't have to worry about the communication. They can even request for example, some kids I would put on contracts and they would be rewarded daily for
Mm,
adhering to the contract, like raising their hand before speaking out or not talking to their neighbors or keeping their desk in order. All those things that kids with ADHD may have real difficulty handling. Um, and depending on the parents' desires, but sometimes the parents could reward the child at home for something too, with something. And so then the teacher would need to email the parents, this is how many points your son or daughter earned today, and he or she deserves a whatever reward they've
mm.
established. So there's a lot of negotiations that need to be handled and communicated with ADHD kids. Just to say also, there are parents who are anti-medication, and one thing I used to do was put kids on contracts to see if they really wanted their reward and if they were able to um, manage their behavior enough to earn those rewards, then I would say, okay, let's go with the contract. Maybe we don't need to do medication. But if you have a kid who really, really wants the rewards and cannot um, control him or herself, their attention, their impulsivity, then I strongly suggest that medication ought to be tried.
Mm. I have two teens and not ADHD, but I can say this in terms of the communication. As a parent, I feel we need to be proactive, and there's so many different people within the school. You have the teacher, psychologist, um, guidance counselors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I found what works is requesting a meeting, a Zoom, either in person or Zoom, with all of them at one time.
Right.
Because
That's what I
every,
was talking about, a student study team meeting
okay,
where everybody's
okay,
involved.
gotcha. Everything gets so fragmented, and then this one said that, that one didn't talk to the other one. It's
Mhm.
just like, and it's just a revolving door that you don't get anything accomplished or very little accomplished. But yeah, it's everybody's got to be on the same page.
That's
You
right.
know?
Exactly. And people have to be together. So
Yeah.
assessments, if the assessment for this child was done at school, then there should have been a team meeting before to
Mm.
decide, yes, we need to assess this kid, or no, let's try a few things and then not. But all psychoeducational assessments have to be um, approved by parents and decided upon by the team of the school and the parents.
Is that usually how it goes? There's a team of people at the school.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. You mentioned psychoeducational. I've never heard that word before, to be honest, until today. But let's go to one from Dan in St. Paul, checks in at instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. He says, my son is about to go through a psychoeducational evaluation, and we're nervous because we don't know what to expect. Could you walk us through what actually happens during that process and how we can help him feel more comfortable?
Okay. Yes, it's a big process, and it can be long. Um, but it really depends, the success of it depends on the relationship that the school psychologist and the resource specialist, who's the academic teacher who's doing the assessment, or anybody else, uh, forms with that child. So I used to do many assessments a year, and I would not always know the kid. Um, so it was always important to establish a relationship, getting to know the kid, show some interest, talk
Mm,
about things they enjoy doing, um, and then tell them about what the procedure is going to be. So in the psychoeducational test procedure, usually the first thing I did was an IQ test, and which would take 2 or 3 sessions depending on the age of the child. And I would explain what we were going to do. I would say, for example, this test is designed for kids from 6 through 16. So I'll ask you some questions, and I won't expect you to know everything, but we'll stop when it gets too hard
mm,
and or something like that. But I want you to try and pay attention to the questions and do your best. And I would usually praise the kid, even for trying, or you're not supposed to tell them the answer is correct or not. You're not supposed to do that, but to just encourage them to keep on going. And most kids actually that I assessed had a good time with the
well,
assessments. Um, it was very different than regular school. It's one-to-one. Um, so most of the time, even if it was hard, they enjoyed, and it's a whole variety of different activities. So, for example, under an IQ test, you have verbal questions. You have nonverbal questions, which kids may not um, do that much at school, but maybe they're very good at. There's memory questions, there's spatial speed questions, speed of processing questions. Um, so there's a whole variety, and they're not all, they're mixed up. So you do one kind of question and then another kind of question. After the IQ test, particularly if the issue is one of a learning disability, memory tests are given, both auditory and visual memory. Um, and, kids can do well on one and not on the other. It's all about investigating how the child is processing information and are there learning disabilities. So, for example, somebody with a reading disability may have a real difficult time with phonetics. They may not be able to remember sounds or associate sounds with letters. They may have visual memory problems. They see the same word, but they can't remember what it was. Um, so, and then there's handwriting issues. So there's the physical part of that. Um, and then there's attention issues, which may be part of the assessment. And there are emotional issues as well. Now, that's not always the case for people, but if there's some behavioral or emotional issues, then tests are given which um, try to analyze that. Storytelling, where they see pictures and make up stories about them, and you try to see what issues the child is dealing with. Sometimes just drawing can help. Um, so there's a whole range of tests that can be given, but the purpose of it is to find out as much about how the child is thinking and what skills he or she has and where there might be some disabilities. So to answer the parent's question, if the kid's nervous, um, I think it's important to let the tester know um, so that they can take some time to form that relationship, maybe even play a game or something like that.
Hmm.
I always found the hardest kids to test were the ones who were ADHD because they would be easily distracted. We would break up the testing period into a lot of different times because they couldn't handle that. But emotionally, kids actually enjoyed. They liked being the center of attention. Um, but I think for the
NF1PN has told you you have limits.
That's the weirdest thing I ever
You
heard.
go.
I don't know where that came from.
I don't know.
That was bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, question on this with those
Yeah.
psychoeducational evaluations, let's say your child is going to have one. Is it okay to reward them? Okay, you do the test today and we'll go for
Yeah.
ice cream after it's done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because they're putting out they're doing something that they're not used to doing.
Okay.
They're putting out effort. Um, And
Hmm.
you don't want them to be scared. Now the very smart kids that you might assess, because there are kids that are, have learning disabilities, but they're also highly intelligent. In fact, to diagnose a learning disability, there is supposed to be a gap between one's IQ and one's academic performance. And so somebody with a 90 IQ and which is the low end of average and is performing at a slightly below level in one academic subject or another, that's not abnormal. But if you have somebody with 130 IQ and they're performing below grade level, then you look for the learning disability, which is getting in the way
Gotcha.
and causing that gap. So the ones who are pretty smart, if they can't do something like the reading um, or math, and then they feel bad about themselves. But no, I've worked with kids, and certainly if they do very well on the IQ test, I'll let them know. I said, you answered some pretty hard questions there. You did really well. And depending on the age of the child, you can the assessor, the psychologist, or the resource teacher can really talk to them about. You do have a learning disability, but what that means is that we're going to work on that very hard so you can overcome it. Um,
So we have about 10 minutes left and two more emails to get to. This one is career connected. I'm going to save that one for a moment. I think we should read this one. Rebecca from Baltimore. I'm the parent of a 10-year-old who struggles with anxiety, and I'm honestly not sure when it's appropriate to involve the school psychologist. How does a parent know when it's the right time to reach out, and what kind of support can we expect?
okay, that's a good question. Um, I think it's much better to err on the side of helping the child. Maybe it's not an error. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but to act on the side of helping the child. Parents often have very good intuition about their child. If a child is anxious, particularly anxiety, I worry a lot about kids that are anxious, and you don't know why. Um, but I would say talk to the school psychologist and see if the psychologist can interview the child, try to figure out what situations are creating the anxiety. Um, I honestly believe in acting sooner rather than later. Particularly at age 10, that's a good time. The kids at age 10 have a little bit more self-awareness and they're aware of their peers and what peers think. So the anxiety could be about social anxiety, it could be about academic anxiety. Um, and
Hmm.
so I would say um, certainly contact the school psych or talk to the teacher first, see if the teacher, I mean, probably the parent already has, but see what the teacher observes. But then contact the school psychologist and have a private meeting and see what the psychologist can offer. It may be some weekly counseling. Um, and usually for elementary school kids, it's not like the average 50-minute hour that adults have with psychologists and
Sure.
psychiatrists. But
That's a great point you bring up there because, parents may be looking at us like, oh, I think my kid needs some help, but I don't want to put them through like an hour long session. That's not the way it typically works.
sometimes it's 20 minutes or something
Hmm.
like that. And sometimes kids will be more talkative and, it
Sure.
lasts longer, but
As a school psychologist, you're going to know. You're going to know whether should continue to go or
right,
pull
exactly.
back and get what you
Yeah,
need. Hmm.
exactly. But I think again, if the psychologist can form a nice relationship with she said it was a daughter, right?
Doesn't say.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't say. Yeah.
Or if the child can form that's the critical thing for every psychologist is to form that comfortable, trusting relationship between the child
Sure.
and the psychologist, and then sometimes it can be hard, but to work on having the child reveal what he or she is going through that creates the anxiety. Sometimes it's hard to figure that out.
Mm.
But if nothing else, you want to create a safe place for that child to go at school. And they often like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I,
And knowing that if I have an issue, I can always go to see Mr. Gold.
yeah.
That's like home base. Um, let's go to this one. This is career connected. It's Lily, looks like from San Diego.
Oh,
She said when she filled out the form, I'm drawn to the idea of supporting kids emotionally, but I know the job can be heavy. How do school psychologists manage the emotional side of working with students who are dealing with really tough situations?
yeah. And that's a very important question, and it's a I'm even going to say it's a skill that a
Mm,
psychologist needs to develop over time. Um, the more kids you see, the the more you kind of become, I don't want to say immune, but you kind of get used to listening to what the kids are going through, and it's not going to impact you quite as much. But it's a very delicate balance between caring enough about the kid, um, empathizing with the kid, and taking care of yourself. So I've
mm,
always said it's so important for psychologists to have their own therapists. If they come upon a really difficult problem to solve, or a very emotional situation, or they're just confused about where to go next, say they have a kid who's being abused, and you're wondering, oh, well, shall I call Child Protective Services? Well, school employees are obligated to do that anyway. But if it's sort of ambiguous, like the mom yells at the kids, should I call Child Protective Service? It's one thing if the kid's being physically abused, but you have to look at the emotional piece of it too. Those are very hard. What about if a kid loses a parent? Or a grandparent. But I've dealt with kids whose parents have died, and it's those are terrible things
mm.
to have to support kids with. Um, but I think the older you get and the more experienced you get as a professional school psychologist, um, this may sound a little crass, but it does get easier to manage the emotional side of it. Not that I wouldn't tear up sometimes. I mean, even after 30 or 40 years, if somebody, but there's nothing the matter with that. Um, I think the main thing the psychologist wants to be able to do is figure out, well, one, be able to be a good listener to the child, but also to be able to work with the child to come up with some interventions. Okay, where do we go from here? Do you just need to talk about this, or do we really want to try something to help alleviate the situation, change the situation, get through the situation? Um, so the if we look at our brains, there's the intellectual side that's working, and then there's the emotional side that's working. And we don't want the emotional side to wipe out our intellectual capacity to try to think of ideas to help the child. On the other hand, we don't want to be so um, rigid and just go through, oh, why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? Without being able to empathize, because kids will, um, they'll recognize, well, he seems like a not very nice guy, or he was really very caring and supportive of me for what I'm going through, my loss or the abuse or whatever it is. And it could even be losing a pet or something like
Sure.
that.
It sounds
And
like it's a very delicate balance
it
between the
is,
logical side, the emotional side, and being able to, and I don't mean this in a bad way, negative way at all, being able to disconnect, where
yes,
you want to help so much and high level of empathy, but then you don't want it bringing you down. So you need to disengage when you need to. I've got a friend who's a nurse. Every third day, she has to take off from work
yeah,
because she doesn't even realize. I'm like, do you realize that you're internalizing the your patients, and she's an in-home nurse, has a number of different patients, but she's drained on the third
yeah.
day and has to take it off because she takes
Right.
it in.
That's true. I mean, everything you read about caregivers, whether you're caring for a parent or a
Sure.
child or a spouse, is that caregivers have to take care of themselves
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think therapy is so useful because, if you're really touched by what a person is going through, and, most psychologists are very empathic, humane people.
Mm,
So they are going to be touched by this. But, maybe something hits you even harder than normal. Maybe it's because it triggers something that you experienced.
sure.
And I'm not against at all sharing, if a kid is going through something really hard, to be able to say, yeah, I went through that too. I know exactly what you're talking about and express that empathy. But sometimes, if you're not really consciously aware of that, you may be triggered to have a much more emotional
Mm.
response. Um, and that's why therapy is really helpful because you can talk about it.
And that's coming from a therapist,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
You need, we all need help. We all need
yeah,
help, and that's a
yeah.
beautiful thing.
And there's
Uh,
nothing the matter with it. It's
no,
good. No matter what age you are, and whether you're working or not.
Alan,
Um,
thank you for the insight today. Good stuff. A lot of great questions, and then your replies, and I truly appreciate it. I mean, this
yeah,
is what it's resonating with parents and people like Lily that is looking at the profession, but a little standoffish in terms of can I handle this?
and I handle that. And it's a reasonable question for a young person to ask.
Absolutely. Uh, Instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. If this resonates, you got a question, comment. If you want to keep it anonymous, that's perfectly fine as well. Good advice helps. We are here to help with his help, Dr. Allan Gold. Thank you so much for today. Appreciate it.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.